Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Budget and Tax Committee, February 23rd, public hearing. We've got 15 bills today. I'm going to read you the list. It's probably a little altered from what it was, what out front is.
It's correct now.
You corrected it already? She's good. But I will read you the list anyway, the order. We're going to start with 657, Senator Benson, and we're going to go to 571, 574, 123, 640, 405, 130, 459, 344, 560, 594, 596, 597, 598, and then 675, Senator Edwards. So, Senator Benson. I just have you for this bill. Don't have anyone else to signed up yet. All right.
Very good.
Maybe there is. It's not here.
So I will do a quick draw McGraw and out of here.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Gazone, Vice Chairman Roosevelt. Oh, I don't see him. Vice Chair and members of the Budget and Tax Committee, I thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to sit before you. I really appreciate it. Senate Bill 657, as amended, requires the governor to appropriate $420,000 to Financial Services Corporation, first in fiscal year 2023. The Financial Services Corporation, first, is a fund manager for small, minority, and women-owned businesses accounts. Grants are provided to eligible fund managers to provide investment capital and loans to small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the state. Fund managers must allocate at least 50% of the available funds to eligible businesses in the jurisdictions and communities surrounding the state's video lottery facilities. The grant funds will be used to provide access to capital, training, technical assistance, and other resources whereby improving the small business capacity, resiliency, and enabling them to remain competitive in the marketplace. During the pandemic, I just hate to even talk about this because I know of businesses that had to go out of business because of the lack of funding. During the pandemic, small businesses were overwhelmingly affected, with many having to close their doors. These funds that we're asking for today would assist small, minority, and women-owned businesses recover and provide job opportunities, which in turn improves the economic conditions in our state. And for this reason, I am respectfully asking that you give this a favorable report for Senate Bill 657. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. So you have a witness? It'll come on. It'll come on.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gazone and distinguished members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. I am Shelley Gross Wade. I've been before you before. I'm the President and CEO of FSC First. We are the non-bank lender in Prince George's County. we have amassed about 12 different financing programs that we use to provide access to capital to small and minority bank businesses that cannot acquire traditional financing for a number of reasons. As a result of COVID-19, we've identified many fissures in our small businesses' operations. And as a result of that, we've amassed a partnership to provide wraparound services to help close some of these gaps that they've experienced to ensure that they're sustainable in the future. The funding request that is before you today will allow us to increase awareness about these resources, as well as bring technical assistance to the businesses, including accounting services. Many of our businesses could not qualify for EBI or PPP funding, or many of the grants that were available through the state of Maryland. But we're committed to make sure that that missed opportunity does not fall upon the businesses of Prince George's County in the future. We're bringing together the resources that they need so that there's a level playing field to increase their competitive place in the market. I, too, am asking you for your favorable decision on this request, Senate Bill 657. There is a companion bill, House Bill 567, which accompanies this. Thank you so much. And I would be remiss if I did not take the time to thank Senator Benson for her sponsorship. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Senator Elfreth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator, and Ms. Griswold, so good to see you again.
Thank you.
Because this issue has come up in the EBA subcommittee, we had this conversation on Monday. How much is the Department of Commerce putting aside for marketing of the incredibly vital small minority women-owned businesses account? Do you know?
To my knowledge, there are no allocated funds for marketing of the DLT fund.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank
You all have
you.
a great day.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Senator Klossmeyer? 571.
And I think there's a little bit of a panel.
You can bring up whoever you like.
Okay, I thought there was somebody else. Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Budget and Tax Committee. This bill is Senate Bill 571, and it is oral hygiene products exemption. And to me, it's a very special bill, especially, I believe, Mr. Chairman, didn't you put the bill in about expanding coverage? So this kind of goes hand in hand with that, because you can
Certainly
have
does.
coverage, and if you don't brush your teeth, it doesn't work, so. So Senate Bill 571 would exempt the sale of oral hygiene products from the sales and use tax in Maryland. This includes toothbrushes, toothpaste, mouthwash, floss, and other general oral hygiene products. Oral disease can be very dangerous and lead to other health issues. Maintaining good oral health with good oral hygiene products is the best way to prevent these health issues from occurring. Low-income Marylanders in particular may struggle to afford quality hygiene items. Reducing or eliminating the financial barrier to these products promotes better oral health and, by extension, reduces the incidence of gum and other oral diseases. This will not only save money for consumers, but it will save money for the state by reducing hospital visits and procedures due to these diseases. Maryland currently exempts several products from the sales tax, including baby products and female hygiene products. To promote good health, it only makes sense to add oral hygiene products to this list, and I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 571, and I am requesting a favorable report.
Thank you. If your panel wants to introduce themselves.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you to the Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of this committee. My name is Mary Backley, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Maryland Dental Action Coalition, also known as MDAC, a statewide network of individuals and organizations working together to improve the oral and overall health of all Marylanders. MDAC strongly supports Senate Bill 571. Maintaining good oral health is crucial to one's overall health and quality of life. Access to dental products that are critical for daily oral health care at home, including toothbrushes, toothpaste, dental floss, and other hygiene products, will allow Marylanders to maintain their oral health and prevent serious disease and illness. Tooth decay, which is largely preventable, is prominent in both children and adults. According to the CDC Oral Health Surveillance Report, 17% of low-income children ages 2 to 5 years of age, 45% of low-income adults ages 20 to 24, and 33% of low-income older adults ages 65 and older have untreated tooth decay. Helping to facilitate and improve access to dental hygiene products can help prevent this and support good oral health behaviors and practices. Dental care professionals routinely recommend replacing toothbrushes every 3 months, brushing at least twice a day, and flossing once a day. However, following these recommendations has cost implications and can be prohibitive for lower-income families and individuals. By eliminating a financial barrier to these essential dental hygiene products, individuals can prevent tooth decay and gum disease. Maryland should take this simple step to make these products more affordable. MDAC wishes to thank Senator Klossmauer for this bill and respectfully asks you to issue a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable committee members. My name is Sarah Price. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of the bill. As has been noted already, good oral hygiene has positive linkage to better overall health outcomes. And our hope is that by relieving some of the cost of these items, more Marylanders would be encouraged to practice good oral hygiene, and that it could have good impacts on the health of Marylanders who may not have access to regular dental care visits. Additionally, as with all of these sales and use tax exemption bills, we hope that this could also have a positive impact on local businesses by encouraging Marylanders to purchase these items in local brick and mortar stores. So we would encourage a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this part of the panel? Is there more to your panel, Senator?
I thought there was one other.
Yep, come on up. Come on up. Switch out some seats.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jack Andrzak, and I'm before you today on behalf of GSK Consumer Healthcare. It's a subsidiary of GlaxoSmithKline. GSK Consumer Healthcare is one of the largest manufacturers of healthcare products in the world. Aquafresh, Sensodyne, Polident, Ambisol are some of their products that are pretty well known. GSK is before you today in support of this bill because it has a corporate priority of improving oral health care for people in the U.S. and in the world. You heard from these panelists that good health care prevents immediate problems and it prevents future problems, which are very expensive. You know, if you don't brush your teeth, things go downhill pretty quickly. In these difficult times, for many people, oral health care, particularly if you're on limited income or poor, takes a back seat. You know, you can't afford it. In these difficult times, every little bit helps, and 6% can be a lot to a individual who has to make choices as to what they're going to buy with their limited income. I want to just add that my client does not support this bill because they believe they will sell more of their product. They support this bill because it's a good idea and it'll help all Marylanders. With that, I would urge a favorable report.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. I have Philemon Kendersky. Is that right? Close? Close enough? Apologize.
Kinjerski, but very close. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Philemon Kinjerski here on behalf of the Alliance of Maryland Dental Plans and the League of Life and Health Insurers of Maryland. We'd like to thank Senator Klausmeyer for introducing this very important legislation. The League and Alliance are in full support of any way to make it easier for Marylanders to get oral hygiene products. As was previously mentioned, oral health is vital in preventing many overall health issues. This bill, it's an important step in saving the state and Marylanders money in healthcare costs. And for these simple reasons, the League and Alliance are in strong support of Senate Bill 571.
Thank you very much. Caitlin McDonough.
It's literally simultaneous bill hearings for the first time. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Caitlin McDonough here today on behalf of the Maryland Dental Hygienist Association and Benefice, which is a dental support organization that supports 9 practices in the state specializing in Medicaid dental treatment. Combined, those practices are one of the largest Medicaid dental providers in the state, both with similar testimony in support of Senate Bill 571. Not only would this, provide some cost relief to our patients and practitioners, we see this as an opportunity to elevate oral health in, and the importance of it in state law. And we join with the previous panel in supporting the legislation. And thank Senator Klausmeyer for her efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There's no questions. That's the last I have on the list for this bill. We'll move on to 574.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Budget and Tax Committee. Senate Bill 574, Organ and Tissue Donation Awareness Fund, Annual Funding and Extension. Senate Bill 574 reauthorizes and extends the funding for Maryland Organ Donor Registry to raise awareness of organ donations across the state. The program has been annually funded at $400,000 since its inception way back in 2007. This bill increases funding to $500,000 annually and authorizes the funding for another 5 years. Donate Life Maryland is a state-authorized nonprofit organization responsible for managing the Maryland Donor Registry. Donate Life Maryland works very closely with 2 federally designated nonprofit organ procurement organizations serving Maryland, the Living Legacy Foundation of Maryland and the Washington Regional Transplant Community. In addition to managing and operating the Maryland Donor Registry, these organizations help spread the word about organ, eye, and tissue donation, as well as how to register as a donor in Maryland. Since 2009, Donate Life Maryland has registered over 2.2 million donors and helped facilitate needed care for many Marylanders in need. Senate Bill 574 will help ensure that Donate Life Maryland continues to have the funds needed to provide this important service. And I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 574 and requesting a favorable report.
Thank you, Senator. Looks like you got your panel up already. If they want to
Okay.
introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Lisa Spicknell, and I'm the Executive Director of Donate Life Maryland. You have my written testimony, but I'd like to share a few additional details regarding our support of Senate Bill 574. As you just heard, Donate Life Maryland is the state-authorized nonprofit responsible for managing the Maryland Organ, Eye, and Tissue Donor Registry. Currently, the register securely and confidentially maintains the records of, as of today, 2.6 million organ donors in Maryland, with hopefully many of your names on that list. Since our inception in 2007, we have individually created, established, and maintained that donor registry, assisting in the allocation of over 4,700 organs to transplant recipients on the donor waiting list in Maryland. We have also established a partnership with the Motor Vehicle Administration to ensure that every Marylander who applies for their driver's license is able to register as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. This collaboration allows Donate Life Maryland to train MVA staff on the importance of organ donation, while also allowing us to be on site to answer any questions that potential new registrants may have, giving us one outlet to educate the public on the importance of donation and providing all necessary outreach materials to the MVAs. This partnership has seen our registry grow to over 2.6 million registrants we have today. Donate Life Maryland also partners with Maryland's two federally designated organ procurement organizations, the Living Legacy Foundation and Washington Regional Transplant Community. This partnership allows Donate Life Maryland to not only identify barriers in the community, but also dispel the myths and misconceptions that come with understanding organ, eye, and tissue donation. Also allowing us to educate the community with national observances such as Donate Life Month, Blue and Green Day, Pediatric Transplant Week, Minority Donor Awareness Month, and Donor Sabbath, all while working to increase donor designations and building a culture of trust in the community. Since our inception in 2007, Donate Life Maryland has received $400,000 a year from the Organ, Eye, and Tissue Awareness Fund. This funding has allowed us to see success we have seen so far. We are asking for a minimum yearly increase to not only continue our success, but to continue the growth that we have seen. Each and every registrant in the donor registry can potentially save 8 lives with organ donation and enhance up to 75 lives with tissue donation. These incredible gifts restore health, extend life, and heal many people each year. We sincerely appreciate the legislature's ongoing support for our efforts and ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Johnson, and I'm the Community Outreach Director at the Living Legacy Foundation of Maryland and a grateful tissue recipient. Community outreach and public education is not a one-size-fits-all effort. Through strategic planning, we can move our mission of saving lives by supporting the communities we serve by having adequate funding. We accomplish this through public outreach, education, and grief support. I am here to testify in favor of 0574. In our work, we are privileged every day to see the positive impact of donation and transplantation on 2 distinct groups, the donor and their family, and the recipient and their family. When one becomes a donor, we can clearly see how their gift saves and heals lives. However, to get that far and to have someone say yes to donation, it takes a lot of education and support. When the Living Legacy Foundation implemented the Decision Project, a grassroots campaign that focused on increasing donor registrations and underserved populations within Maryland, we knew that there was more we can be doing for our communities. Here we had an area in Maryland where many people needed an organ transplant, and yet their next-door neighbors, people who could potentially save their life, were not designated. Additionally, with so many people in Maryland on the wait list, we had to recognize our responsibility to provide education not only about why it's important to be a donor, but also how to take care of our health to avoid needing a transplant in the first place. Our donors come from various backgrounds and social circumstances. When we serve a population, we have to look at each individual and ask, how can we best serve them? Without the proper funding, community outreach will continue to be the biggest hindrance that nonprofits face, especially in the health and human services sector. I hope the committee maintains the funding of 0574 so that one day the waitlist across Maryland will significantly decrease and more residents, especially in communities that are underserved, will consider registering as donors. It is not an easy task and it will take time, but we can't give up and we must continue to keep the funding that the Organ and Tissue Awareness Fund provide. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Tim Healy. I'm a resident of St. Mary's County, retired Navy Rear Admiral, and board member of Donate Life Maryland, father of 3 children, grandfather of 3, and recipient of a heart in 2013. Graduated from the Naval Academy, spent 33 years in the Navy, flying jet fighters from aircraft carriers, and with my final 10 years in the Navy being stationed at Naval Air Station Pax River. When I retired in 2008, I was contemplating where my wife Sherry and I would live. I was informed by Sherry, a Talbot County native, that it should stop worrying about it, that we're going to live in Maryland. And she was right. Life was good. I had a nice job in Roslyn, Virginia, which I commuted daily. Then in 2011, I started experiencing shortness of breath and a lack of stamina. Being a fighter pilot, the last person I would ever want to see was a doctor. But my wife drove me to the hospital. I was diagnosed as having had a heart attack and treated with a couple stents, and then eventually an artificial heart or left ventricle assist device, which kept me alive for 2 years until I was able to get my heart. I was lucky. I was healthy enough that I was able to function near 100% while awaiting my heart, and so I was not deemed a priority for the few available hearts. But after 2 years, my luck began to run out, and the device began to shred my blood cells, and it was my turn for the next available heart. Since then, I've run several small businesses, served on a half dozen boards, given away our daughter in marriage, and welcomed a daughter-in-law to the family, met my 3 grandchildren, and this summer my wife and I will celebrate our 45th anniversary. I've listed myself as an organ donor since it became possible in my home state of Illinois. Today in Maryland, over 50% of people getting the driver's license do the same thing, but 50 isn't 100. It's not enough to provide the organs and tissue to meet the demand. Medical advances have greatly increased the life expectancy of recipients like me, but it's the availability of the organ and tissue that are lagging. I firmly believe that by educating the public about the life-changing difference, you heard Lisa say that you can affect 8 people with one total donation, they can make by becoming a donor will greatly reduce the wait time for the ailing person. This bill will go a long way in providing the funds to carry out this education process, will allow so many others the opportunities and the second life that I have been given. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story. Senator Young.
I'm a organ donator. If I
Future.
What's that?
Future.
If I drop dead tomorrow, would you still call my family to see if you'd take my organs or not?
We absolutely would. Our first contact would be with your family to ensure that,
And what if they said no?
then that would be a conversation we would have with your family, and ultimately what our choice has been is we respect your family's wishes,
So you would override my wishes?
depending on the conversation with your family. Our Family Services Department works extensively with families in these areas, and unfortunately, I don't have anybody with us here today from that department that could go into greater conversation, but I'm happy to set up a meeting with you to have someone with Family Services discuss that conversation and what that would look like with you.
Well, that's one of the problems I have with your program, but second one, are you opposed to opt-out instead of opt-in on your driver's license?
I don't believe that we are. That's not something that we've discussed, so that would be a conversation I would sit down and have to have.
Well, actually, I had a bill in like that, and I think you all opposed it.
This year?
No, a couple of years ago.
This is my second year here, so I was a little before my time, but I'd be happy to sit down and discuss it with you.
I would like to know what your official opinion on that is. Talking about spending a lot of money to get people to opt in. And if you had an opt-out program, especially if you're going to call a family anyhow.
Right.
I mean, in a way, what's the point of being an organ donor if you're not going to honor my wish?
I mean, legally binding, once you sign up to be an organ donor, it is a legally binding contract. We also look at the harm that it could cause to the family with the grief process. So that is something that we take into consideration, which is important to help a family in their healing process, as you well know. But like I said, it's a conversation that our Family Services Department would have, and I'm happy to set up a meeting with you to discuss both of these options.
Well, the last time I got an answer to that was you wouldn't honor my wishes. You'd honor my family's. And it makes me say, why should I bother if you aren't going to pay attention to what I say?
Right.
So,
That kind of goes into our education as well, with having conversations with your family on what your wishes are. So that's part of our education program that we really focus on.
well, if I have it on my driver's license, you know what my wishes were.
Correct.
So,
Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So Senator, good to see you. So my understanding is this program's already up and running. This bill modifies the sunset, so it doesn't end, so it just extends the sunset. And then based on what the fiscal note says, it sounds like the program is so used that there'd be a deficiency, they'd run out of money. So this is just adding an extra $100,000 to what's already funded. So the program's already funded. This just adds another $100,000 because it's overutilized right now, so we'd be adding more money to that. And that's just making sure that the program continues. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Jackson.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the bill, Senator. I'm too a donor, and I look forward to the younger members of my family being donors. I just wanted to say hello, take a personal privilege, Mr. Chairman. Lisa Spicknall and I have known each other in the works over the years, and great to see you in this capacity. So
Thank you.
you're looking well. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next bill. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3. Let's do it.
And this one, I believe I have no one here.
That's what I've got too.
You guessed it?
That's what I've got too.
Okay, I thought you said you guessed it. I was going to, okay, doesn't
Nope,
matter.
nope, nope.
Senate Bill 123, income tax subtraction, modification, retirement income. Senate Bill 123 expands the pension exclusion that is currently available on qualified defined benefit contribution pension plans, 401K plans, 403B plans, and 457B plans to roll over IRAs or annuities if the contributions consist entirely of tax-free rollover of distributions from an employee retirement system. The subtraction modification will provide a much-needed tax relief to those taxpayers who have had their defined benefit plans shifted to defined contribution systems, whether by choice or as a forced transfer. Contributions made to these types of deferred accounts are subject to the same withdrawal restrictions and early withdrawal penalties that are applicable to qualified pension, tax-saving annuity, and deferred compensation plans. IRAs are a significant source of retirement savings. Rollovers have become more common over time, and most rollovers occur when people change jobs and move 401K or 403B assets into IRA. Senate Bill 123 will provide fairness and equity to Maryland retirees who have chosen careers that may not have offered a qualified retirement plan. And I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 123 and am requesting a favorable report.
Thank you, Senator. So actually, we didn't have anybody down as part of your panel, but we do have, I presume you're Daniel Fickus?
Daniel Fickus. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
Oh, okay, there you go, okay.
Second. In order to conserve some time, I am also scheduled to testify for Senate Bill 130 and 344. My testimony would be the same, so I'll just...
That's fine.
My name is Daniel J. Fickus, 35-year veteran retiree of Baltimore Police Department, past president of the Baltimore City Fraternal Order Police, and I sit on the Board of Governors for the Baltimore Retired Police Benevolent Association. But most importantly, I've been a lifelong resident of the land of pleasant living. The Baltimore Fraternal Order Police represents approximately 4,300 members, and the Retirees Association, another 1,600. And we truly support Bills 123, 130, and 344. In 2017, I testified favorably for the HB 100, the Hometown Heroes, and that afforded a $15,000 subtraction modification to retirement pensions. I also testified that legislation if passed, would not reduce the valued state revenues, but maintain and generate revenues by stemming the exodus of retired officers to non-tax pension states. I can offer some statistics of our retirees in Baltimore to support that. Residing out of a state in 2017, 28% of our retirees were residing out of state. 2019, it was 24%. Excuse me, I keep fogging up here. 2020, it went down to 21%, and 2021, it went to 26%. Residing in Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia. In 2017, that number was 54%. 2019, 51%. In 2020, 48%. 2021, 45%. Residing in non-tax pension states. In 2017, that number was 71%. 2020, 81%, and 2021, that was 85%. The increase in officers residing out of state and the decrease in the relocating to Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia is the siren song of Florida. Florida has gained a lot of our retirees in this past year. The uncertainty of the legislative body to augment the current income subtraction modification legislation. Additionally, with our officers in Baltimore City and also our firefighters, we endured other fiscal abatements which rendered the rationale for departing Maryland to non-tax states. In Baltimore City, the Baltimore Fire Police Pension System, we sustained draconian modifications resulting in monetary reductions to our pensions. Recipients of Social Security, which I am one, are subjected to up to a 60% reduction in benefits imposed by the Social Security windfall elimination penalty. So I'm only getting 40% of what I paid 100% into in my Social Security. These facts and figures delineated indicate that our retired officers relocating out of state was diminishing, except for minor changes this year. Interestingly, our numbers in Baltimore are similarly representative of other law enforcement agencies throughout this state. The reason, subtraction, modification to retired income. Senators, we hope we get a favorable report on these bills. Our retirees, we could certainly use it. We want to stay in the state of Maryland, as most retirees, but we need to take and go where we can get the best bang for our buck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions on this bill? Thank you both very much. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll see everybody later.
Okey doke. Senator King, 640.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, due to the pandemic, our public schools have seen a decline in enrollment while the cost of educating a student continues to climb. Last year in the Blueprint for Maryland revisions bill, the legislature passed language that held schools harmless from the loss of revenue due to the pandemic enrollment. This was achieved through a fairly complex funding formula. Senate Bill 640 will once again ensure that all school districts who have had declines in enrollment during the pandemic will still receive the same maintenance of effort funding as the previous year. The bill further ensures that those counties who used federal funds to exceed maintenance of effort requirements will not be penalized in the next year. Our school systems need all the support necessary to navigate through this pandemic, and Senate Bill 640 will help them with the efforts, and so I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 640. Mr. Chairman, I have some special guests with me today. Our brand spanking new school superintendent, Monifa McKnight Dr. Monifa McKnight is here, and Ms. Brenda Wolf, the president of the Board of Education. And they'd like to say a few words.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Chair Gazzoni and Vice Chair Rosapep, and esteemed members of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. For the record, I'm Brenda Wolf, President of the Montgomery County Board of Education. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today in favor of Senate Bill 640 about alterations for the maintenance of effort requirements. On behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Education, I'm pleased to speak to support of this bill and the significant funding support it would provide for public schools in Montgomery County and across the state. As many of you know, Montgomery County Public Schools has had continued growth in student enrollment for the majority of the past 12 years, having added over 20,000 students since 2010. However, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted this pattern, not just for MCPS, but across the state. The pandemic safety protocols and community concern about transmission led some families to opt for non-public school options for educating their children. Some parents chose not to send their students to early pre-K programs, and some delayed kindergarten. Many schools did not meet their enrollment projections, and some even saw a decline in student enrollment. Yet, as the pandemic recedes, we see enrollment once again increasing, not yet at the same rate as pre-pandemic, but increasing nonetheless. In fact, MCPS saw a significant increase in international student enrollment this year after 2 years of minimal international enrollments. It is imperative that school systems are well positioned to meet the needs of students, both those currently enrolled and our returning students. It is important for school systems to have the resources to support all students, particularly given the impact of the pandemic on students. Senate Bill 640 recognizes the complex landscape public education is navigating currently and offers school systems options to ensure the needed funding is available. Our mission is to ensure that every student has the academic, creative, problem-solving, and social-emotional skills to be successful in college and career. This mission has never been more critical. Thank you again for your work to bring this critically needed support to public schools in Montgomery County Public Schools and across the state. We ask the committee to please offer a favorable report on Senate Bill 640.
Thank you. Thank you, President Wolf, and good afternoon, Chair Gazzoni, Vice Chair Rosapep, and esteemed members of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. For the record, I am Monifa McKnight, as Senator King said, the brand spanking new superintendent in Montgomery County Public Schools. And I must say that I am pleased to sit here today, and Ms. Wolf's comments offer many of the insight of my own that I'll share with you in just a moment. I do want to again thank you for just the opportunity to come and speak with you directly today in favor of Senate Bill 640 about alterations for the maintenance of effort requirement. Ms. Wolf mentioned that COVID-19 has in fact impacted our school system in a significant way. School systems are and will always be the place of teaching and learning, and that has to be the core mission of the work that we do. But the pandemic has issued a stark reminder that we are so much more than that. And in many ways, our community have depended on us to be much more than that. We served as hubs for our community members to receive meals. We provided opportunities to connect them with resources that they desperately needed during the pandemic. And we also created opportunities to create the relationships and reestablish relationships that we lost during the pandemic with one another, the school system and its families. And this depended on the work of so many people. And I'll start with our staff, who in so many ways really performed in a heroic way to provide these supports to our students and their families during the pandemic. They've gone above and beyond and served as a comprehensive support network for our students and families, and have taken on many additional responsibilities, and at a critical time in which we have not been able to fulfill critical staffing positions. As you know, and as Ms. Wolf stated, we saw a decline in enrollment during this challenging period. Even as many children returned to our school system, the students in front of us presented something different, that they now have a need more significant than one we have ever witnessed before. To meet those academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs, our schools must have the resources to be transformed into the sort of community hubs that the state actually envisions. As noted, Senate Bill 640 offers the exact flexibility and innovative thinking that is needed right now and that our public school systems are dependent upon. By providing options for school systems to determine the appropriate maintenance of effort requirement to be followed, the legislation is acknowledging the differing needs of the school systems within our state, without relinquishing the firm accountability guidelines that we ought to be held to.
Keep going.
Finish your thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like many superintendents across the state, my mission and the goal remain to keep students in school and to keep them healthy and to keep them safe in all the environments that we provide for them. And we want them to be creative and really true problem solvers that really does meet the needs of them being college, career, and community ready. The pandemic has taught us that we cannot do this work alone, and in that spirit, we respectfully ask that you offer a favorable report on Senate Bill 640. I want to thank you once again for allowing us to come and speak today on behalf of the needs in Montgomery County Public Schools.
Thank you very much. Questions for this panel? Senator Zucker.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Senator King, President Wolf, Madam Superintendent. Even though I'm not at the witness table, consider me a function of it. For just a modest special fund increase, it's going to go a long way to help Montgomery County Public Schools and our students and educators. So Senator King, thank you. Senator King, thank you for being a champion on this and appreciate the partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools. Isn't that so, Senator King?
That is, you are so right.
Thank you.
All right. We have some more witnesses to come up. So you're going to probably have to share some chairs. John Willems. And Michael Sanderson. Yen?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. It's a delight to be here today to support a bill introduced by one of MABE's champions, Senator Nancy King. Anyone who says that a position on a Board of Education should not be used as a stepping stone has not heard my praise of Senator King, and would say that this bill is timely, and in all seriousness, it addresses a very serious issue, which is to provide for a smooth transition from FY22 through FY23 by requiring the higher of what would be required based on the declining enrollment and what was actually provided as the last highest appropriation in FY22. And in that way, it smooths things out in a very reasonable way. I really appreciate the fiscal note in explaining why it may be less intensive of a hit for counties than may initially appear to be the case on the first chart in the fiscal note. The second chart is certainly the one we should draw our attention to. And yet those numbers are real and very meaningful as well. The blueprint for Maryland's Future Act is wonderful, and I don't want to create any impression that we don't love every aspect of it, but it did create a new approach to maintenance of effort, requiring that counties provide the higher of their last highest appropriation, and this local share, and this aggregate local share of categorical and per pupil funding becomes the new alternative base for county funding. It was not anticipated that enrollment would decline so precipitously as it did in response to COVID, and so the disruption in the relationship between maintenance of effort and local share you see in the fiscal note. There's quite a gap there, and obviously we would warn against any kind of specter of dropping to the lower of those two. But the higher of makes sense, and with the fix provided in this legislation, the 22-23 school year will look much more adequately funded on behalf of our teachers and students than would otherwise be the case, and we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 640. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm Michael Sanderson with the Maryland Association of Counties. I am delighted to be in person before you, my first time in a couple of years, and especially delighted to be before you on a bill where I get to talk about nerdy, esoteric math, and I like nothing better. We've submitted amendments on this bill. I think the bill is smart, but potentially incomplete. And I've submitted probably a clumsily crafted set of amendments to the sponsor. I'll get them also to committee staff. Here's what I think the bill needs to round out the goal that I think you want to accomplish here. If last September's count is down, but we want to say we don't think that's a reflection that the school systems have really shrunk, very sensible. Let's make some policy for a one-year bumper around that. Let's hope this is the last year where we have a September count that seems like it has to have an asterisk. However, with the bill as it's structured, as we know, there's multiple tiers now for what counties have to fund. But for those where old school maintenance of effort still applies, that's what this bill is about, at least flat fund as many dollars as last year. If the bill passes in its current form, however, you will have artificially bumped up those counties' per pupil funds for 23, and that goes into the base that you use to calculate for 24. So I think if the theory of this bill is we're dealing with a one-year hiccup in our student count, and let's not have that result in decline in overall funding, I don't think you'll get pushback from the county community saying fixing that for this year makes sense. So the core philosophy of the bill is fine, but when those kids come back, if you don't have a caveat saying that is sort of one-time funding for this year only, it's built into the base and everybody goes up by 3% or something like that, which I don't think was the long-term considered policy by the bill. So that's the amendment that we would suggest on the bill. We have a one-year problem. Let's propose a one-year fix. In a few years, the old school maintenance of effort is going to get washed out by the Kerwin components, and this is all going to be in the past. But for now, that's the law that controls for about half of our counties.
Senator Rosapel?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Williams, do you agree with that?
Well, 22 years ago, I would have been sitting where Michael is and making the same case as Mako's education associate director. So, but no, and here's why. We support the bill as introduced, and we recognize the merits of what Michael is saying mathematically. I'm never going to argue with Michael on math. That it will raise the per pupil amount of funding going forward, is that there is a robust set of waiver provisions, and we would rather wait a year to have counties' situations be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so for now, that is MABE's position in support of the bill as introduced without amendment. But Michael and I have discussed the MAKO amendments, and we will continue to do so and work with the committee on their approach to moving from FY23 to FY24 following the passage of this bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh, was somebody else? No? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that concludes that hearing. We're going to move on to 405. Mr. Mitchell. If you have a panel?
You guys come right after us.
Oh, sorry about that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Mr. Vice Chair. For the record, my name is Kiefer Mitchell, Chief Legislative Officer for the Governor. Last year, in the midst of a global pandemic and economic turmoil, I was before this committee to present the Relief Act of 2021, which included $1.45 billion in urgently needed tax relief and economic stimulus for struggling Maryland families and small businesses. Thanks to the leadership of the legislature and the members of this committee, we worked together to pass the Relief Act of 2022 with nearly unanimous support. Again, I'm before you today on behalf of the administration requesting a favorable report on Senate Bill 405, Retirement Tax Elimination Act of 2022. Since the beginning of his administration, Governor Hogan has been dedicated to reducing the tax burden on Maryland citizens. Over the years, many Marylanders, particularly our retirees, have expressed how they love living and working in our great state. However, they are unable to retire here due to not being able to simply afford the retirement taxes. This legislation helps eliminate state income taxes for Marylanders 65 years old or older and who are not employed full-time. This bill is structured to eliminate retiree income taxes over a 6-year phased-in approach. Our state continues to have one of the strongest economic recoveries in the country. Late last year, it was announced that tax revenues are expected to be $1.6 billion higher than projections, and that we now project a $2.5 billion surplus. In other words, our fiscal health is now stronger than ever. Finally, to paraphrase a constituent who contacted the governor's office supporting the bill, a growing senior population means more commerce, more economic vitality, and a bigger tax base to pay for state services. Again, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 405. I've been joined here by Assistant Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management, Mr. Mark Nicole, who can answer any questions that you all may have.
Questions for the administration? Okay, I think we all have been digging into it.
We appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. You bet. Is there a second panel that there is? Welcome to come up.
I guess I'll go first. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Schwartz, and I am the chair of the State Legislation Committee for the Maryland Federation of North, which represents more than 300,000 federal employees and annuitants living in Maryland, not to mention our senior population. We strongly support passage of SB 405, and let me tell you why. Senior migration to more tax-friendly states is a real issue and should be a real concern to you and Maryland's economy. Retirees may retire to Florida for the weather, but they do not retire to Delaware and Pennsylvania for the weather. In Bankrate's July 2021 study, Maryland ranked last of the 50 states as the worst place in which to retire. This mirrors a similar study by MoneyWise magazine in 2020, which also placed Maryland dead last. When Marylanders retire elsewhere, they take their tax money, buying power, and community service with them. The story of a recently retired military couple was shared with me. They had 2 military pensions, plus Social Security, moved from Waldorf, Maryland, to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and saved $24,000. According to census data, Maryland lost population between 2020 and 2021 because of what they called out-migration. According to the latest annual United Van Lines National Movers Survey, 28% of those leaving Maryland cited retirement as a reason. With Maryland's own General Assembly Spending Affordability Committee now projecting an historic budget surplus of, I had gotten the figure of over $4 billion, no longer 2.5, at the close of fiscal 2022, and with structural surpluses projected through 2027, now is the time to provide Marylanders with meaningful tax relief that has been necessitated by the federal tax plan passed in December 2017 and eliminated or reduced so many of the middle-class tax deductions. It is time to look at the long-term impact on the economy and not just the short-term cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Whoever wants to go next.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gazon and members of the committee. My name is John May. I'm representing the Maryland Military Coalition of 19 uniformed services and veterans organizations with over 150,000 members in Maryland. The coalition is a nonprofit, all-volunteer veterans advocacy group representing the interests of Maryland veterans, service members, retirees, their families, and survivors. The Maryland Military Coalition supports SB 405. Broad-based tax relief is not just good for our state's economy, it's also good for our quality of life. Maryland seniors deserve to have peace of mind to know that they can afford to stay right here in Maryland, where they spent their lives working and raising a family, and where they continue to contribute so much. With struggling families and retirees getting squeezed by inflation and higher costs across the board, there's no reason why we can't get this done for the people of Maryland, and let Marylanders keep more of their hard-earned money in their own pockets. Maryland has one of the highest costs of living in the nation, which discourages aging in place and encourages migration to senior-friendly states. Maryland's tax burden and overall high cost of living also discourages military men and women retiring from active duty from remaining in the state and pursuing their second careers here. Very few military personnel can live on their retirement income alone. Most require a second career. Unfortunately, Maryland's tax burden and cost of living encourages migration to military-friendly states, where 35 states offer military retirees an immediate 100% tax exemption on their retired pay upon stepping away from active duty. A legislative goal of the Maryland Military Coalition is 100% elimination of state income tax on military retired pay, as has been regularly advocated in earlier General Assembly sessions. Indeed, it is the object of several bills in this session. And we are strongly in support of related legislation in this session that will move us further toward full exemption of uniformed services retired pay from Maryland state taxation. SB 405 offers one approach toward the realization of the coalition's goal, but for the age and employment restrictions. The coalition urges the adoption of legislation to eliminate or significantly reduce all taxes on all sources of retirement income and allow Maryland to compete aggressively with other more senior-friendly as well as military-friendly states. We support SB 405 on its merits, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you for the opportunity to express that support before the committee today.
Thank you very much.
With amendments.
Okay. Good afternoon, Senator Gazone, Senator Rosapep, and distinguished members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. For the record, I'm Pat Gabal, representing the American Legion and the Fleet Reserve Association, who combined have nearly 200 years of service to the veteran and military community. We believe Senate Bill 405 will greatly aid our members, some of whom, as you've already heard, are thinking or seriously considering leaving Maryland because, in their words, the high cost of living. Both the organizations feel reduction in taxes would be a major step in their decision whether to stay or go. The Fleet Reserve Association and the American Legion request a favorable favorable report on SB 405. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm for with amendments if you want to.
That's fine. Go ahead.
To go,
No,
to
you're
go
fine.
later?
No, you can go now.
You go now?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Julia Lucas. I'm a retired air traffic control specialist from Washington National Airport. I'm retired and I'm 65 plus. For the past 4 years, tax years 2018 through 2021, I have been taking the subtraction from income based on 65 plus and retired. The current 2021 tax season, the subtraction figure under the Social Security Act was $34,300. I've already received my refund for this year from the 2021 session. tax season. According to this bill, Section 10-209B and C, which is the Social Security figures that we've been going under, is silent, but favors a 6-year plan to eliminate certain retirement plans as taxable completely. The way I read it, if this bill was to pass, next year my subtraction would be $10,000, an increase above, versus an increase above $34,300, which is would be a significant decrease for me. I recommend as an option to use the bill's 6-year plan, which is the 207 MM in the bill, or for taxpayers already using the Social Security figures, which is 209 BC under the tax code for income tax, to continue doing so, or grandfathering those taxpayers already operating under the current law. So finally, does 10-207MM, that's the 6-year plan under the governor's proposal, does that wipe out 10-209B and C under the Social Security Act figures, which I told you when I did my taxes this year, it was $34,300, which is 65 plus retired and or 100% totally disabled. So at that note, I support it 405 with amendments, and I appreciate the committee's time and consideration of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. Just a point, it's our interpretation that it's the higher of the two as it ramps up. So you would get the higher of the two as it ramps up. I'm going to guess that's the intent of the administration. And I'm seeing a head shake over there. So yes, that's the way it works. That's their plan. Is that clear?
Yeah, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying you could use the higher of the two figures?
The 10 or the 34, but as it ramps up,
Because it goes up every year.
Right, at some
But
point,
like I said,
at some
they don't
point,
mention, they mention D in 209 in the bill, but that talks about military retirement. It doesn't talk about what I'm talking about.
Right.
It doesn't mention, it mentions 207A, 207MM, and 209D, which is the military. So to me, it's kind of confusing, but in my case, if next year I can only do 10,000, I think I'm southbound.
That's not their intent, but you can talk to them afterwards and they'll give you
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you bet. Thank you all very much, appreciate it. Is there, is there one more person who signed up? Yeah, looks like we got it. Mr. Dragitt?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today in favor of Senate Bill 405. My name is Dave Dragitt. I'm a retired Army colonel, and I'm the legislative liaison for the Fort Meade chapter of the Military Officers Association of America, or MOA. We are part of the Maryland Military Coalition. The chapter currently has 95 members, with approximately 75% of them drawing military retirement pay. MOA chapters are advocates for the uniformed services community at the state and local levels. I want to point out that the Maryland veteran population is declining. According to the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs 2010 report, there were estimated 471,000 veterans in Maryland. According to the census last year in July, there are 365,000 veterans in Maryland. That's a decline of 22.4%, while the state's population has grown 8.2%. Many factors for that decline, but one of them has to be the cost of living, which you've heard from other witnesses today. And as was pointed out earlier, Maryland fares poorly as a retirement destination. Fidelity Investments, which has $4.2 trillion in assets under management, which includes 401ks, IRAs, and other funds, rates Maryland having a great quality of life, but the state excess income is heavily taxed, and some counties also tax that income. And they estimate that the cost of living in Maryland is 29.7% above the national average, 29.7%. Bank rate, which you also heard quoted, which is used by Bloomberg and is quoted by CNBC, as you heard, rates Maryland's 50th. We sampled 3 other sources of retirement rankings. The highest rank for Maryland among those 3 was 37th out of 50. The rest were in the 40s. So there are many factors that make up the cost of living beyond the control of the legislature, but taxes are not one of those factors. So we are in favor of this bill. It provides more disposable income, especially when combined with other legislation before the General Assembly with regards to subtraction and modification of military retirement pay. We think it's important that our members think it's important that you mitigate against the higher cost of living, which will make Maryland more competitive in retaining veterans. And we're, Fort Meade chapter is in favor of Senate Bill 405. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Thank you very much. Oh, Senator Young? Yeah.
For Mr. Mitchell?
Oh, sure. The question is for the administration.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you aware of the study they did several years ago in North Carolina?
I think last year you educated us when we were before this committee on there. Yes, sir.
And you know what they found there?
I'm getting a little fuzzy up here as I age.
Actually, they found that there was not an adverse effect on the state because the people stayed, paid real estate taxes, sales taxes, volunteered in the community, whatever. I've long thought we should do a study like that here, but I thought theirs was a good example. I don't know where this bill's going to go. As you know, I put one in like 5 or 6 years in a row way back that went nowhere. How would you feel? I've been thinking about ways to try it out. If it were approved and we did it 1 year at a time, but stopped if we found it was having an adverse effect, but we could like each year.
Are you implying, Senator, are you implying a sunset for each year?
I'm saying that we could call a sunset on it each year if we felt it was having an adverse effect.
I think we would be more supportive, obviously it's the will of the legislature to, amend the bill any way that you like, and we're happy to work with you. But, I think we would have an issue if it was every year we stop and then go again and stop and then go again. I think it would cause a lot of confusion to many of the retirees who are retiring and trying to do their taxes.
Well, unlike a lot of people, I think the bill makes sense and could justify it, but I've been thinking about a way to give it a try.
I'm happy to come and follow up with you, Senator.
And stop if we see it's having an adverse effect.
Okay.
At least then, if it were not having an adverse effect, we go on to the next year and at least begin to give some relief. I just wanted to throw it out to think about, I guess.
Yes, sir, I'll follow up.
Senator Alfred.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mitchell, thank you. I'm sorry I had to step out. I wanted to ask the question. I support the bill, happy to be a co-sponsor of the bill, but I know it extends beyond fiscal year 27, which is kind of the last date we have a fiscal note for. Do we have any idea of the cost to the state beyond fiscal 27? $1.7 billion. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Concludes the hearing on 405. We're moving on to 130. Senator Jackson. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Were you signed up? Yes. I apologize. What was your name, sir?
Paul Sundell.
Yeah.
Good.
We'll just need to get your information after you testify. We don't
Sure.
have you on the list.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure. My name is Paul Sundell. I'm a registered Democrat and retired federal government macroeconomist who lives in Severna Park. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to testify before this very important Senate committee. I am 67 years old. I've lived in Maryland for over 30 years. Maryland has many positives, but unfortunately how it treats seniors from a tax standpoint is extremely poor. And it is causing many seniors to leave the state. I did provide tables from Kiplinger that, and it compares various states and when you compare adjacent states to Maryland, as well as popular states for retirement on the East Coast, such as South Carolina and Florida. From a tax standpoint, Maryland is the worst, and it is compounded by the high cost of living in the state, and it's also harmed by the fact Maryland does not come anywhere near fully indexing its tax code to inflation. Only about less than a third of the Maryland tax code is indexed to inflation. That causes, as inflation rises, the person's tax payments to the state go up more than inflation. Maryland should index its tax code fully to inflation, such as what the federal government does, and the survey results indicate since from April 2020 through July 2021, Maryland actually lost population. And when you look at the United Van Lines survey, over the last 5 years, retirees were a 9.24% of them moved into the state, while 24.67% moved out of the state. And from an economic efficiency and a fairness standpoint, there needs to be serious reform in this area. The vast majority of people are like me, worked and lived in Maryland for their prime working years. When you are retired, you consume less state resources. Your children typically are out of the school system. You do to drive less. Retirees spend money and are active in charitable giving. And if retirees leave the state, Maryland collects nothing from them. From a tax standpoint, and they are, and retirees are not supporting other other Maryland businesses, so there's a multiplier effect going on, and there are many federal programs that are based on a state's population. So if you lose population, you get less in the form of federal grants. So, and Maryland down the road will lose estate and inheritance taxes. There should be a grounds. I fully support the Hogan bill, but there should be grounds for compromise as well. In the past, every time Hogan has presented a bill to reduce the tax liability for Maryland seniors, it's been killed in committee with no offsetting proposals. And it's one of the awful things in politics now. There's not much compromise, but I mean, with a $4.6 billion surplus entering this year, to me, it would be a major travesty to not do significant tax reform for seniors in this season. Right, just one more sentence and I'll leave you folks in peace. That, you know, seniors by migrating out of the state are telling the Maryland government they are not happy. And they deserve, through what they did in their working lives, to have a fair tax system that allows them to stay in a fine state such as Maryland. I thank you much for your time, and I do appreciate you letting me speak for more than a allotted amount of time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, we're going to move on to Senator Jackson, 130.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of Budget and Taxation Committee. We have, I think, probably 8 or 9 panelists, so 2 or 3 folks can come up at a time. Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget and Taxation Committee, for the record, Senator Michael Jackson, and as well as in my capacity as the chair of the Senate Veterans Caucus. On behalf of Senate Bill 130, Income Tax Subtraction Modification, Military and Public Safety Retirement Income. Senate Bill 130 is a fairly straightforward piece of legislation that this body passed out the last 2 legislative sessions. That increases the income tax subtraction modification for military retirement income from $15,000 to $20,000. Additionally, it similarly raises the subtraction modification to $20,000 for retired public safety professionals, which includes corrections officers, law enforcement, fire rescue, and emergency services personnel. Residents would need to be 55 years of age to claim either modification. As many of you know, my law enforcement and military background make me uniquely aware of the needs for this legislation. As a retired law enforcement officer, I guess I need to add that emphasis. I've heard from many of my colleagues, retired military and law enforcement or public safety, who are facing monetary challenges. And previous bills, some bills ahead of us spoke to some of those challenges of folks being able to stay in the state that they're retired, due to the taxation. Because of our unique situation of housing, several families, military, as well as public safety have had challenges. This legislation would help put us in line with numerous other states which provide similar benefits for retirees. 26 states currently exempt military retirement pay on state income taxes. 9 states have no state income taxes at all. I have great confidence in the legislation as a co-sponsor the last couple of years, and would serve as a significant incentive for those retiring from the military and from public safety to stay in our great state of Maryland. With that, I would ask this committee for a favorable report. Mr. Chairman, you have a list of our witnesses.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Senator.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and distinguished members of this Budget and Taxation Committee, Senator Jackson. My name is Tom Cherkowski. I'm a retired Navy Rear Admiral who served on active duty for 31 years as both an enlisted man and an officer. I've lived in Annapolis for 28 years, and I serve on the Board of Directors of the Military Officers Association of America, or MOA. I'm a member of the local chapter, of course. I've chosen to remain in the state despite its high taxes, and many of those whom I served with in the Navy have chosen not to live in Maryland because of those very same taxes. Unfortunately, many Maryland companies and organizations could have taken advantage of the many professional and leadership skills that these individuals developed and honed in the military. The reason that they chose to live in other states is that there are new states that don't tax military pensions. They found excellent jobs with great lifestyles, and with those new jobs and income, they pay the required state income tax, of course, that generates more revenue for those states. Additionally, businesses in those new states benefit from the economic ripple effect that they create. Groceries, rent, mortgage payments, recreational spending, for example. So why not keep those people in Maryland? There are currently 35 states that fully exempt military pensions from taxation. This includes nearby Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New Jersey, and several states are moving towards that direction, and that includes nearby Delaware. The Towson University Regional Economic Studies Institute did a study that the General Assembly directed several years ago to examine the financial impact of retired military personnel on the Maryland economy. The Towson study found that when a military retiree reenters the workforce, his or her household sustains nearly $115,000 annually in economic activity and supports their new state with more than $7,500 in state and local tax revenues. That Towson study, though, also warned that if Maryland doesn't exempt military retirement pay from state and local income taxes, retired service members will choose to move to military retiree-friendly states. So please consider legislation that will encourage military retired personnel to remain or come to Maryland, and I ask that you kindly return a favorable report on Senate Bill 130. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Senator Jackson, for your support.
Thank you.
Hello, hello, Chairman and the distinguished members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. My name is Cheryl Klang, and I'm a spouse of a retired Admiral of the NOAA Corps, the smallest of the 8 uniformed services. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and testify in favor of Senator Jackson's bill, SB 130, Income Tax Subtraction Modification, Military and Public Safety Retirement Income. In my role as a member of MOA, Maryland Chapter, or Council of Chapters, Spouse and Surviving Spouse Liaison, and a past president of the NOAA Corps Officers Family Association, I come before you today. NOAA's headquarters is in Silver Spring, Maryland, and many of our officers assigned there live in Maryland. Some will call Maryland home once they retire and may even seek second careers in the government or the private sector. Each year, more states offer full retirement pay exemptions. Currently, there are 35 of them, With current trends where remote work options are increasingly becoming permanent, this leaves Maryland an even less desirable retirement state for our NOAA Corps officers, retirees, and their spouses. I have included a map and a fact sheet in my written testimony for you and submitted that. For more than 2 decades, MOA and other service-related organizations in the state have been advocating for legislative action to help make the state a more desirable retirement destination for retirees, their spouses, and families. Senator Jackson's bill, SB 130, makes the next logical, incremental step toward the ultimate 100% objective. The MOA Maryland Council will and does support any legislation which advances the income tax subtraction for military retired pay. As you consider many of the similar bills on this topic in this session, please advance SB 130 in the legislative process by giving it a favorable report out of this Taxation Committee. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Jackson. My name is Lynn Nash. I'm the director representing the Commission Officers Association of the United States Public Health Service, and I'm the communications director for the Maryland Military Coalition. I'm also a 30-year uniformed service retiree. I have a PhD. I'm a nurse, and I happen to be a chem bio and emergency response expert. I served on the National Security Council for over 15 years, and yes, I have a security clearance still. You may not know that over 1,200 Commissioned Corps officers live in Maryland. We have 4 of our largest duty stations here, our headquarters, NIH, Food and Drug Administration, and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We also have a number of officers who work downtown but choose to live in Maryland. These officers are highly trained, skilled. Many of us have multiple degrees. The greatest number are healthcare professionals. Those are doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, vaccine reviewers, and healthcare policy specialists. And as you know, with COVID, we've got a lot of jobs that are, a lot of vacancies in those professions. When I took off my uniform, I made a conscious decision not to work because of the tax liabilities. I had an offer to be an SES. I had many 6-figure offers, but honestly, when my husband finishes his federal career, we're leaving. We're leaving my house that I absolutely love, and I've lived in it the longest in my 30-year career. But you see, 35 states don't tax us. So I'm not the only one. I have 20 officers, senior officers, who are also leaving. Not a single one of them are staying. So this is a bump. It's not perfect. We want 100%, but we'll take this as an incremental step. We support this legislation and ask you for a favorable report. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Bryson Popham. I'm appearing before you today on behalf of the Army Alliance. The Army Alliance is a nonprofit advocacy organization that exists for one purpose, and that is to support the mission of the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Harford County. APG is one of 12 major military installations in this state, and I would respectfully submit to the committee that the defense industry is a not very well-known major economic driver in this state. So the subject of this bill could not be more important. And by this bill, I'm referring specifically to page 3, line 2, just that one little phrase where we move 15,000 to 20,000 as a subtraction modification for military retirement income. You heard an earlier witness refer to a study done by the Regional Economic Studies Institute at Towson University. That was done in response to House Bill 1542 in 2019 by the Department of Commerce with the vigorous support of my client. Later today, the committee, each committee member will receive a copy of that study. I urge you to at least review it and take a look at it. It contains some very interesting and I think useful information for you. You will also receive another document, which is testimony by the Southern Maryland Navy Alliance, our cohort in Southern Maryland for Pax River. Many of these military installations, like APG, have organizations like the Army Alliance to support them. I don't have specific data, but I do have an anecdote that you may find useful. One of your colleagues over in the House, Delegate Teresa Riley, who's from Cecil or Harford County, I can't remember which, made the comment in open committee in Ways and Means when a similar legislation was before their committee a couple of years ago. She said, I get so tired every night at dinner time watching a stream of vehicles leave Maryland and go up into Pennsylvania. There is really only one reason for that, and it's the subject of this bill. People go where it's in their economic interest to go. The other comment I would make about this bill, because you have a bewildering array of tax relief measures before you this year, so why pass this bill? And I would suggest to you that one word serves, and that word is incremental. You have always been cautious about such measures. You've passed this bill twice, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Senator Jackson for introducing it, but I respectfully urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 130.
Thank you very much. And as you point out, we've passed this bill twice in this committee, just as a reminder.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Buttle, on behalf of the Professional Firefighters of Maryland, we represent approximately 12,000 active and retired firefighters and paramedics across the state of Maryland. I'm going to keep my remarks brief today in the interest of time. Mr. Chairman, you are correct that in both 2021 and 2020, this committee passed this bill unanimously out of committee. It also passed off of the Senate floor unanimously both years. I know that most of the senators on this committee are very familiar with this bill and for the reasons behind it. I have submitted written testimony for the record, and moving forward, I am always happy to work with the committee or take any questions today and both in the future. But for today, we just want to thank the committee for their past support over the last 2 years. Hope to have that support again this year, and just really appreciate everything that you do on our behalf. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and certainly hope we get a favorable report again this year on the bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Michael Rund. I'm the President Emeritus of the Professional Firefighters of Maryland, and I was the current president when this bill passed in 2018. And the reason I'm here is I'm a retiree. I retired in 2019 after serving 32 years in Howard County, and I've been able to take advantage of what this committee and this body has done for me. But the one thing I just do want to reiterate that what this bill is going to do for me and for the firefighters, police officers, and correctional officers is it's going to make us stick around longer. What we did in 2018 when we passed this, we took care of our firefighters, cops, and correctional officers for 10 years. When 65 hits, this benefit stops for all of us because it's subject to the Social Security offset. This bill fixes that and makes it so that we can continue to collect that benefit past 65. So with that, I encourage a favorable report of the Senate bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again, Senator Gazzone and members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. I'm Pat Cabal, here again representing the American Legion and the Fleet Reserve Association. Our organizations deeply believe that raising the tax threshold will be a significant benefit to the veterans and active military community. Lowering the eligibility to 55 will be most beneficial to those who spent a career serving our country. As an example, someone who enters a service at 18 is eligible to retire at 38 or at the maximum 48. This bill would greatly help them at their time. Hopefully, it will quell this thinking of, I love Maryland, but it's just too expensive for me. To close, we urgently request a favorable report on Senate Bill 130, as has been in the past, and we also commend Senator Jackson for his continued support of veterans' issues here in the Senate and in his career with the House of Delegates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that's it, Senator Jackson.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, 459, Senator Salling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and committee. The question is, why is the military leaving our state, as you heard? I'm glad you asked that question, and I'll answer it for you. For the record, I'm John Ray Salling, Senator, Baltimore County, Senate Bill 459. I hope I can get your approval. This bill would work together, helping our military by providing a state income tax credit to them when they purchase a home. Specifically, this bill would apply to all the military personnel, active, disabled, veteran, reserve, National Guard, in good standing. It would allow a 5% tax credit based on the loan for a home. The credit is capped at $100,000 and would carry forward for 3 years. The credit is only for primary dwelling and only for one mortgage. It would also allow a one-time tax credit of 20% of their first mortgage payment. I don't want our state to miss the opportunity to have our military residents, as residents become of a high cost of living and lack of benefits. Being that our state is somewhat of a central hub for our military, there are those in the military that work in Maryland, but take their earnings to the home surrounding states of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia and Delaware. As a former member of the United States Army, I want to make sure that we make it as economically possible for our military to reside in Maryland, because it is a benefit to our state and our people in the military that have worked for more than 10, 20, or 30 years and worked hard as they served our country should have that benefit. I think this bill would help show our military that we support them, and it will help our state with the revenues that would come from having our military live in Maryland. We need to look to the long-term future of Maryland as a permanent home for our servicemen and women, and this bill does just that. I would respectfully urge a favorable report. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Questions for the Senator? Thank you very much. 344, Senator Hershey.
Have a panel with me, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, bring one up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Steve Hershey to present Senate Bill 344, the Retirement Tax Reduction Act. Mr. Chairman, just to start off, both myself and my co-sponsor are also co-sponsors of the Retirement Tax Elimination Act that you heard earlier today. So if you're so inclined to pass that, I guess I can limit my testimony, but if you're not, this testimony is a little bit more of a middle ground, expanding on what we already do for retiree pensions and now creating a subtraction modification for those receiving Social Security benefits or are at least 65 years old and not working full-time, and targeting those retirees that would benefit the most, those that have an adjusted gross income of less than $100,000. As many of you know,
Maryland is consistently ranked as one of the worst states to retire. Amongst those reasons are generally heard accountability and the tax climate. So the underlying purpose of this bill is to encourage Marylanders to stay in the state after retirement and to also bring retirees from other states to Maryland. The tax reductions will benefit many retirees in Maryland, especially in Maryland's rural and underserved areas. Collectively, rural Maryland has an older and poorer population compared to the urban and suburban parts of the state, meaning that taxes affect this population more than others. As you heard earlier, Maryland has one of the strongest economic recoveries in the state after COVID. This committee knows far better than most that there's a $2.5 billion surplus. And Mr. Chairman, I just think that this is the year to take the next step and to pass the Retirement Tax Reduction Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. My name is Tammy Bresnahan. I'm the Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland. As Senator Hershey indicated, and we want to thank Senator Hershey and Senator Ellis for sponsoring this legislation. It appears to us to be bipartisan, and I know that you all think and know that retirees need some kind of relief. I will say that I don't know about your phone, but my phone has been ringing off the hook, and that isn't normal when there's bills like this up. Our retirees, our members, really, really want us to support this legislation. And as a matter of fact, in a recent survey, 60% responded that maintaining their retirement savings should be an AARP legislative priority. And so we are doing that. As you also know, within our state, Marylanders over 50 create an economic impact much greater than the portion of the population. And as they get older, that percentage shrinks. Their total domestic product in 2018 was $163 billion. Moreover, the report found that state residents 50 and older made up 36% of Maryland's population. So again, they're paying a large percentage in 2018, but supported 1.6 million or 44% of jobs across the state and 38% of state and local taxes. We look forward to working with you. We do believe that retirees do need some relief, and in this climate, I don't know, like I said, your phone, but my phone has been ringing off the hook. We also put in testimony that supported the bigger package, Senate Bill 405. We're going to leave it to your wisdom to figure out what Maryland retirees can get and what we can also live with for the next coming year. So we ask a favorable report on Senate Bill 344. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm still Paul Schwartz, and I'm still representing the national active and retired federal employees, as well as all seniors in Maryland. I won't go over the same points I went over in support of, that I passionately went over in support of SB 405. Those points still apply to this. The one difference, the main difference between this bill and 405 is that cap. And if that cap enables this legislation to get passed, we are all for it, because something, as I said in my earlier testimony, needs to be done. So being I have 2 minutes left, I want to focus on the reason why bills don't get out of committee, and it's always the fiscal note. And Chairman Gazzoni, you may remember my passion for the fiscal note when we were discussing decoupling. I will refrain from the theatrics of tearing up the fiscal note, but I clearly don't have confidence in a fiscal note that says $1.6 billion. What we did at NORF is we prepared a white paper to try to capture to project what the long-term impact and cost would be of this kind of legislation. We talk about dynamic scoring all the time, but we never apply it to the fiscal note. So I would request that everyone in the legislature received our white paper on trying to project what the true impact is. Take a look at that when you're discussing whether or not to pass these bills, and take a look at the longer term rather than just to focus on the short term. I'd leave you with that. Thank you, and again, we support both 405 and 344.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the panel? Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Senator Feldman, 560.
Mr. Chair. Okay, Mr. Chair, good to be back here on this Feldman-Rosapep piece of legislation.
Why are you here?
Just by way of explanation, when it was thought that the bill was likely to go to finance, I somehow found myself playing the senator from College Park, but I'm happy to do it. So in any event, the intent of Senate Bill 560 is to resolve a contradiction we currently have existing between the leasing policies for traditional university housing and Medco housing. So for those of you not familiar with Medco, the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, it was formed back in 1984 to support economic growth in the state. Medco has an interest in hundreds of projects in the state, but the specific projects of interest for this bill are the properties that serve as dormitories for the University System of Maryland students. So by way of background, many of you recall last year the fact that in the weeks prior to the COVID shutdown in 2020, we had thousands and thousands of college students who were in the midst of their housing search. Many had already entered and signed housing agreements for the fall when they fully expected that life would continue unchanged later that year. And of course, that's not what happened. And once the lockdowns were announced, many students and families were rightfully concerned that their safety and health were at risk and looked to be released, if you recall, from the leases that they had signed for the following school year, knowing all the dangers associated with returning to campus when the transmission rates were skyrocketing. Due to the danger and the risk of the pandemic, students living in campus housing were granted the ability to opt out of their on-campus housing leases without any cost. But not all the campus student housing is owned by the universities. I think a lot of folks didn't really know that. One example is the South Campus Commons apartment complex. The Commons is virtually indistinguishable from any other dormitory. It's located right smack in the heart of the campus. It's only available to students, but in reality, it's not owned by the university. It's owned by Medco. And actually, Medco owns a variety of on-campus apartments in universities across the state of Maryland. So while the universities were looking for ways to give the students at the time flexibility and reduce the concentration of students on campus, Medco, by contrast, if you remember, would not release the students who had signed leases for the following year from their lease obligation. The students and the families were of course shocked to find themselves treated differently than every other student on campus, and what resulted was a situation where some students had options to receive back thousands and thousands of dollars that they had paid, while other students, often only literally one building away, were on the hook for their contracts. And I'm sure everybody in this room got lots and lots of phone calls from desperate students and families, and I know I did, and again, I'm sure Senator Rosapep did. They tried to contact the university to understand what the situation was or why it was different. Many learned for the first time that it was not actually a university building that they or their children were living in, but owned by Medco. So the parents and students struggled to gain reliable and accurate information, but even with our resources, I think a lot of us were met with little success when trying to contact Medco to understand the situation. So ultimately what happened, 140 families from the University of Maryland and Towson hired an attorney to represent them, and they joined in a lawsuit. The parents and students in the lawsuit cited financial hardship caused by both Medco's policy and then the legal battle that they were forced to fight. You'll hear from Len Lucci today, who was the lawyer representing the families. He'll describe the process and the final outcome. So what's 560 do? So what 560 does is an attempt to partially respond prospectively to the mess I just described going forward by attempting to bring much needed transparency, accountability, and new guidelines for Medco to follow in the context of a public health and safety emergency closure. So this is a very narrowly tailored bill. It's tailored to that particular situation. So the bill does several things. Number one, it improves transparency between the landlord and tenant by requiring Medco to clearly reference that they are the owners of the building on the signature page of the lease agreement. In addition, Medco must include a specific notice section on the lease agreement that states that they are the landlord of the building and provides contact information for the management of the Medco student housing project. And every reference to Medco must be emphasized and in bolded font. These measures will ensure there's no confusion whatsoever in terms of who owns the building, and that clear communication is available. Moreover, in the event the University System of Maryland closes any university due to a health or safety emergency, such as a COVID pandemic, in the case of 2020, Medco-owned student housing projects must abide by the same lease releasing protocols that are offered to residents of student housing owned by the university itself. Furthermore, Medco must provide the same notice to vacate that is given to all other students of university-owned student housing during a state of emergency. And the bill will be applied prospectively. And while we hope it will help prevent another chaotic moment like experienced in 2020, we're not going to be able to rectify that whole mess with this legislation. So bottom line, members of the committee, I mean, to me, this is common sense transparency disclosures for our students with the University of Maryland system. I note I did receive an email from Tom Sadowski, the executive director for Medco, last Friday, indicated that they've already begun incorporating much of the transparency language that is in this bill into their lease agreements. But he or the university system have raised some concerns. They'll speak to about some of the other language in the bill and I'll defer to this committee to sort through that. It has to do with what constitutes a debt and the closure language. I think they're fine with the transparency language. It's the closure language. They raised some concerns back over in the House hearing. And again, I'll defer to the wisdom of this committee to sort through that. The only final point is there was a little conflicting testimony over in the House. I do think Mr. Sadowski, on the one hand, talked about the closure language, and then he also at the same time testified that the university system may already have the authority to close Medco properties. I'll let him sort of work through it. It has to go with their credit rating and their ability to do P3 projects. So that's in a nutshell what's laid out for the committee. And with that all said, I'll defer again to the committee's wisdom and ask for a favorable on Senate Bill 560. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I've got you having a couple people in your panel, but whoever wants to come up and go.
I know we got Len Lucci here. So.
Right, whatever order you want to play it.
Would you like me to go?
Whatever order you want to do, as long as you go.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Len Lucci. I am not here on behalf of any organization. I'm not here in a paid capacity today, but 2 years ago, I was hired by about 100 students at University of Maryland and 40 students at Towson University. And as Senator Feldman said, I'm sure this is like probably second only to unemployment claims that you got constituent calls about. These students that I represented were great. They were highly organized. They had all sorts of technological ways of staying in touch with each other that I had to learn about. But basically, we informed the campuses and Medco that these facilities were not, they were not giving them habitable facilities given the crisis at the time in August of 2020. We did not know about ventilation reforms or anything else like that. If you look at these dorms, as Senator Feldman said, on both campuses, because I did, you have two buildings next to each other. They look alike. They're both subject to the same codes of student conduct. They both have the same housekeeping staffs. It's just that they have different landlords. And when these students found out that they were not being treated the same way as the rest of the students that had the campus housing shut down, there was a lot of anxiety. So we informed the university and Medco that if they wanted to sue these students, we would defend them in court on the ground that they were not getting what they're supposed to get, which is a safe and habitable premises. And if they wanted to do that, we would consolidate the courses and the cases and have it all before one judge. They chose not to do that. What they did choose to do is they entered into separate agreements, one between Medco and Towson and one between Medco and University of Maryland College Park on how they would try and make some amends. And I think they did that only because of legislative pressure from your committee and the committee across the street. But there were different agreements. They had different terms. The Towson one is much more favorable than the University of Maryland one. Neither one would make all students whole, and they were negotiated without talking to the students, without negotiating with me on behalf of the students. And had they done that, we might have actually had some compromise, but that's how it went. And so this is a good bill. The most important part, of course, is to treat everybody the same. So I also would urge you a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. My name is Alec Bergman. I'm a senior at the University of Maryland and an intern for Senator Feldman. I'm here today to provide a student's perspective on the Medco residences at Maryland and the issues students face during the COVID-19 pandemic. To start, the line between what is university-owned versus Medco-owned is nearly impossible to decipher. As the Senator explained, all of my fellow students who weren't directly involved with the Medco leasing situation had no idea that there are on-campus buildings not owned by the university. And why would they? The Medco buildings are in the center of campus, only house students, and even have the same architectural style as every other building on campus. To any reasonable student, there would be no reason to believe there's anything different about these residences. In my discussions with students who had leases with Medco, very few of them knew about the corporation that controlled their own building prior to the events of COVID. That said, the pandemic illustrated why these differences matter. In the chaos of COVID, the University of Maryland went to great lengths to protect students. They released students from leases because they knew that transmission rates would be high and that there would likely be economic shocks and that classes would be virtual. However, Medco refused to follow the university's lead. They refused to simply allow students to be released from their lease without getting another person to step in for that lease, which is hard to do during a pandemic. While I was able to simply opt out of my lease for next semester, my friends with Medco leases were not given that option, despite my dorm being right across the street from their dorm. This forced these students and their families to make unnecessary choices with real health and economic consequences. By all accounts, the Medco organization gave very little guidance to the frightened and rightfully angry students and families. Students spent hours on hold trying to contact building officials and were often given outdated and incorrect information from these officials. This problematic situation is easily preventable. Greater transparency requirements and rules that limit Medco's ability to deviate from the university would ensure that all university students are treated equitably, no matter which dormitory they choose to live in. I urge a favorable report on this bill so that we can avoid such unnecessary harms to students. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, distinguished senators, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Scott Depew, and I'm from Arnold, Maryland. My daughter's a junior at Towson University. She lived in an on-campus Medco dorm as a freshman and would have kept that same room as a sophomore if it weren't for COVID. I'm testifying today in favor of Senate Bill 560, specifically all three of its important provisions: transparency, closure of the Medco dorms when the university cancels in-person instruction due to health or safety emergencies, and 3, release provisions that mirror the university. Listening to House testimony from 2 weeks ago, everyone seems to be in favor of the transparency provisions. However, I contend that transparency alone does not go far enough. Parents and students have a common understanding of the terms on-campus housing and off-campus housing. Most people don't understand the complexities of P3s, and no amount of fine print or bold type will accurately convey their financial risks. Medco and USM market this as on-campus housing, but then want it to be off-campus when it comes to placing the interest of bondholders before students. Being able to market this as on-campus housing should come with the responsibility of closing dorms and releasing students from their leases when campus is closed for in-person instruction. During House testimony 2 weeks ago, Medco's executive director stated the closure provisions weren't necessary because the state already had this power. The fact that the state didn't exercise that power in the fall and winter of 2020 is evidence of why this bill's closure provisions are necessary. Across Towson University and the University of Maryland College Park, approximately 998 students sought relief from their lease obligations. This amounts to 46% of Towson Medco leaseholders. Dozens of lawmakers and the governor were involved for months. The comptroller publicly scolded Medco's then executive director. This was a global pandemic, the likes of which haven't been seen in 100 years. If all this wasn't emergency enough to act at the time, nothing short of this bill's provisions will be satisfactory to protect Maryland students and families in the future. I'd like to thank Senator Feldman and Senator Rosapap for their sponsorship of this bill, and I ask for your favorable support to move this Senate Bill 560 forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for this panel? Thank you all very much. Mr. Sadowski?
Okay, well now, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. For the record, again, my name is Tom Sadowski, and as of 6 months ago, I became the new Executive Director of the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. And today, I'm pleased to offer my testimony in support of Senate Bill 560 with amendment. We have filed formal testimony along with the fiscal note for your consideration as well. Medco has long been an active and engaged partner with the University System of Maryland for many years. This partnership has resulted in the development of more than 7,000 beds across the system. High-quality facilities delivered at the lowest possible costs. Those costs related to construction, management, maintenance, and necessary improvements. All of these costs, by way of our partnership, we were able to keep them off the USM books, which was really important for a number of reasons. Because this thereby enables the system to invest in other critical facilities, maintenance programs, programming, and other services benefiting the students. Ultimately, the relationship that Medco and USM share has been an essential part of USM's ability to offer students a world-class educational experience while remaining both affordable and accessible. Over time, and particularly during the pandemic, admittedly, we noted that our relationship with the system was confusing to both students and families, and that's why we have since worked to enhance the clarity of the language contained in the leases and operating agreements with them. And we did so to better articulate, one, who the students and families were doing business with, and two, where to go when they had concerns. We were pleased to share this language with the various sponsors of this legislation and applaud both Senator Feldman and Senator Rosapap for sponsoring this bill. It is, as already testified, it's later in Senate Bill 560 where Medco and the system, for that matter, have significant concern. And specifically where USM is afforded control over the closure, for whatever reason, I guess in this instance, the health emergency, the closure power over Medco's housing projects. Back when the pandemic hit, the system asked us to close, and we did. We kept open certain facilities for students that still needed housing. But ultimately, simply stated, as has been previously stated, Medco is an instrumentality of the state of Maryland, and the state of Maryland does currently possess the power to close, if ever needed. If USM, secondly, if USM was given the power, it would effectively put the project costs back on the system's books. This would really have a negative impact on their credit rating, and it would change the economics of the financial agreements that Medco has for its projects. In closing, we greatly value our partnership with the system and its benefits to the students and families, but now more than ever, we appreciate our responsibilities to students and families as tenants of our project. So we're proud to contribute to their education experience here in Maryland, and we want to continue to offer the best quality facilities at the lowest possible cost. And that's why we support Senate Bill 560, but with that critical amendment that I had mentioned. Thank you, and I encourage your favorable report and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Questions from anyone? Yeah, there's one more witness.
I want to make a comment.
Okay, at least I think there's one more witness. Is it Marceline White? No, I guess there are no more. Yes, sir.
Chairman. Thank you. Colleagues, I know more about this than you're ever going to want to know, and I'm not going to bore you with it. It was a mess. It was a mess from a transparency point of view. It was a mess from a financial point of view. It was a mess from a legal point of view. And it was a mess from a health point of view. And I want to put a little context around this. In College Park, at least, there are, I don't know, 9,000, 10,000, 8,000, some number of students who live in the university dorms. And then there are, I think, about 3,000 who live in the Medco dorms. And then there are thousands more who live in purely private high-rises and thousands who live in single-family homes. And at the point in the crisis, the healthcare crisis, the city, the county, the university were trying to thin out the population because students don't go to residential campuses to socially distance, as we know. And so it was a real problem, a real danger. We had lots of conversations with everybody about this. In reality, what happened was the university really thinned out the on-campus housing, which was very good for public health and very good for education. The privately owned places didn't at all, and you had Medco in the middle, which got everybody confused, which is your point. I think it is important to understand that the university owns the land. Medco doesn't own the land. Medco is a financial vehicle, and they borrow money, and they contract with the folks who manage it. So they are not like regular private sector owners. What they've done over the years, in my judgment, in College Park has been very helpful. I think the model is a good one, but they do show, and we deal with these in other areas, the problems you can have with public-private partnerships is they're not perfect, and they share risks in ways that people don't understand. So I just want to put that on the table for when we come back and try to figure out this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the hearing on 560. We're going to move on to 594. We've got 4 bills of mine coming up right now.
Move favorable.
The good news is you will recognize just about all of these. Most of them have been handled unanimously in some form or fashion. So, but we're going to try to move quickly because then Senator Edwards has one more after that, and then we're going to do some voting. So, yes, gentlemen. Matt. So this first bill is the Winery and Vineyard Economic Development Grant Program. It's a grant program. The reason that I mention that is because last year we passed out of here unanimously a tax credit bill. It was to extend a sunset on a very successful program that has been utilized very well. It was funded at about $500,000. It has been oversubscribed, and it gives grants to wineries and vineyards for all kinds of capital expenses, both for new vineyards or work in expanding at existing ones. This year, the grant actually is set at $1 million. There's a couple reasons for that. It is taxable, so it's sort of a little less valuable to the recipient overall. But most importantly, that the reason that it's a grant, and we know where the each side of the road here, the House and the Senate, that goes its own way. They made it very clear that they're not interested in doing a tax credit. They may consider a grant, and I consider this a valuable program, so I put it forward. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that background and for supporting this through the sponsorship of the bill. Kevin Addix, for the record, with the Maryland Wineries Association and Grow and Fortify, here to support this legislation, which has had incredible impacts on this industry. As this committee knows, having passed this bill many years ago, the wine industry in the state brings incredible value back to the state, not just through the excise tax and the sales tax on premium wines, but because of the side effect of needing grapes. And grapes need land, and grapes are a perennial crop which will last upwards of 30 years. And when you install grapes onto acreage, that acreage is de facto preserved. And in many cases, because these are long-term crops, the wineries are preserving this land. And so you have benefit after benefit by encouraging this industry. It is one of the more expensive industries to get into, and so these grants have been used for qualified projects to help with the development of infrastructure, the development and the expansion of some of the very expensive equipment that is needed to produce wine, including the grapes themselves, which can be expensive as well. The industry has also been under duress the last 2 years, obviously due to COVID and the lack of visitors. That has come back a little bit, and then with Omicron has scaled off a little bit as well. But also because of threats to the industry, natural threats like the spotted lanternfly, which you may or may not have heard of, but the state is currently under quarantine for this beast that was brought from Asia, and one of its favorite treats are grapevines. And so there have been some replanting of grapevines and some recommendations from the university that will require things like this fund to help to support. So with that, I urge your support of this, and I'll be here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Gazone, members of the committee, my name is Phineas DeFord. I'm here representing Bordy Vineyards, my family's winery, and also the Maryland Wineries Association. I'll just give you a couple of little financial tidbits on what it takes to get a winery started. It's about $15,000 an acre to establish vineyards. Got about $100,000 in vineyard equipment, tractors, sprayers, mowers, etc. Each wine barrel costs about $1,000 once it's delivered to the winery. Stainless steel tanks, give or take $15,000, $20,000. You got to build a tasting room. You have to build storage. The list goes on. All that has to happen before you've even sold your first bottle of wine. So the tax credit, as it was, and the bill for this grant are hugely important for businesses like mine. I'm a third-generation vintner in my family. Been on my farm for, my family's been on our farm for over 5 generations. We really rely on these types of programs. I will say that investing in our businesses pays dividends back to the state of Maryland. Of course, we provide tax revenue. Bordy employs over 23 people. Of course, we receive over 60,000 visitors a year. So we're one of Baltimore County's most visited tourist destinations. And of course, just the prestige and notoriety that comes with producing great wine in Maryland. I will say that Maryland is very capable of producing excellent wine. We've received attention from consultants from around the world. We happen to work with one of those. He's a gentleman out of Bordeaux.
So, you know, it's a state that is really capable and has been producing excellent wine. We received numerous awards in national and international competitions. So in closing, I just hope that you will consider support of this bill. I would like to thank the chairman for sponsoring it, and of course, I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Love your facility.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Matthew Boley of Rifkin Weiner Livingston on behalf of the Maryland Wineries Association in strong support of SB 594. And of course, we'd like to sincerely thank the chair for sponsoring this legislation. Today, you have heard about many different programs and pieces of legislation that are worthy investments for Maryland, and I proffer that this legislation, which invests in our Maryland-owned wineries and vineyards to further grow and expand, is also worthy of enacting. Maryland wineries are small businesses that help us preserve Maryland agriculture and open space. They enable us to further connect with the land and outdoors, which we have seen to be of even more importance and interest during COVID. This grant program is limited to these Maryland-owned wineries and vineyards and is capped at $1 million a year for the total program allocation and 25% of an eligible capital expense for the establishment of a new winery or vineyard or capital improvements made to an existing winery or vineyard. These capital investments help to spark economic growth throughout the state and increase tourism in Maryland. These are establishments that your constituents want to see thrive and grow. These are the amenities and attractions that will help attract and retain Maryland's workforce. If you take a look at our written statement, we expound on some of the positive economic developments that the expired tax credit program had fostered, including new jobs in Maryland, increased wine production by our wineries and vineyards, and the continued preservation of open space. In order to grow our local economy, small businesses, and protect open space and agriculture, I urge a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Questions for the panel? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Senate Bill 596. This is definitely one that this committee's seen and voted on a couple times, been on the floor, voted out there. The only person who hasn't voted on it yet is probably Senator Jackson. No, that wasn't last year.
2019?
Yeah.
2020?
Yeah. So, didn't get out of committee over there. Okay, so this is corporate income tax, single sales factor, apportionment, deferred tax relief. So in 2018, you might remember, we changed our apportionment system for corporate sales taxes to a single sales method. And the reason that we did it is that we were trying to assist Maryland businesses with that change in procedure. In the process of doing that, it changed the method of computing the income tax revenues, but it also changed the calculation of a corporation's income tax expense for financial reporting purposes. And so what we did inadvertently in the process is for some publicly traded companies, and there are very few from what we understand. I actually only know of one, but there may be as many as 5 that comptrollers acknowledged, that this second change is extremely harmful. And this, at the end of the day, this really comes down to how corporations have to report things. It will not cost the state anything for us to change this, but it causes, in terms of the deferred tax, it requires a reporting mechanism through generally accepted accounting principles that make it very disadvantageous for companies, particularly one in which might want to come here and invest more in the state. And so all this does is essentially creates an accounting, I'll call it, what's that?
Fiction.
Well, maneuver, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, that postpones or defers, or puts the taxes over, the deferred taxes over 10 years, essentially not causing the state anything, but allowing these companies to get a better treatment on their books. And I think I will leave it at that and let let the panelists probably fill in the gaps where I screwed up something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Rob Garagiola with Compass Advocacy on behalf of NextEra Energy Resources. You did a great job explaining that, and this is something that's been before the committee in the past. Again, NextEra is one of the world's largest renewable energy developers. They're involved in storage, they're involved in EV. They've made a number of investments in the state of Maryland. They're looking to do a lot more investment in the state of Maryland. They're also involved in the retail and wholesale electricity markets and have been involved in that for, I think, well more than a decade at this point. I don't know all the companies that are affected by this. I believe AT&T and Verizon also submitted written testimony in favor of this legislation as well. I would surmise there are probably a number of other ones out there. As the chairman indicated, there's no financial cost to the state for easily a decade, and that can be addressed even further potentially. But it does affect the income and balance sheets that corporations have to produce under GAAP accounting, and that can affect their ability to obtain capital. It can affect their stock valuation. There's a number of things that could affect that can negatively impact not only businesses like NextEra that are investing in Maryland, but other businesses as well that may be investing in Maryland or look to invest in Maryland. So again, the committee has acted on this legislation before. A number of states have also passed similar types of provisions, and it's states that are in the Northeast as well as the South and Southwest, red states, blue states. I mean, it's been approached and passed in states in a pretty bipartisan fashion. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I have with me Angela Patel, who's a CPA with NextEra Energy, really just to answer any questions the committee might have, but would urge the committee to adopt a favorable report for SB 596.
Very good. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
All right, two more for me. Next one is both important and fun. And you know this, you've heard this one before. Well, for you, well, you know, fun, different people have their sense of fun. Okay, this is the theatrical production tax credit. And you absolutely have heard this a couple times in the committee. As you may remember, it's an interesting business that the national launch of tours has to be organized somewhere. It has to be put together. The program, the stage, all the aspects of a tour have to be put together somewhere. And the two companies that do the vast majority of this are Maryland companies. However, as it turns out, because of other credits around the country that make us less competitive, those companies don't end up or unable to end up doing that work here, giving us the business, giving the unions, all the set people, all the stuff that goes into putting together these productions. And we have facilities. As a matter of fact, we're investing, continuously investing. We've just recently reinvested again in the Hippodrome. And I don't even know what we call that anymore. This is like the annex, the additional facility there. There is space that will sit fallow, particularly during the summer months. And if we can get some economic activity generated there, it's going to help the local economy as well as some local specific businesses, and that's what this tax credit is all about. And I will let it up to the panel. Ron?
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate you. Chairman Gazzoni and Co-Chair Rosa Pep, along with all the members of the committee, thank you for your time today. My name is Ron Legler, and I am the president of the state-owned France Merrick Performing Arts Center, home of the historic Hippodrome Theater, and also Maryland's home for national touring Broadway shows. It's simple. Senate Bill 597 puts our live entertainment industry in Maryland back to work. We were first to be shuttered during the pandemic and the last to reopen. Our 4 unions, stagehands, musicians, box office, hair, and wardrobe, along with Maryland live venues, need a hand up, not a hand out. This tax incentive will put our unions back to work throughout the summer when we're traditionally closed. As the senator said, we have 2 of Maryland's companies that produce up to 70% of all the national tours in the United States. Smart states have already offered this incentive, and these 2 companies are taking advantage of it outside of our state. We want to bring it home where it belongs, to Maryland. The pandemic has been brutal to the live entertainment industry, but the shows will go on, and all of our stories will be told on Broadway and the road across America. I want to thank you in person for your commitment of the rainy day funds to all the arts organizations across the state. You provided a lifeline when we needed it most, and you saved so many institutions. Your support of House Bill 597 will help shorten our long road to recovery. Thank you, Senator Gazzoni, for sponsoring this important legislation, and you really are a true champion of all the arts in Maryland.
Sure. Hi, my name is Madeline McCluskey, and I'm an Associate General Manager at Troika Entertainment. In the last 4 years, Troika Entertainment has launched 16 national touring musicals. In the fall of 2019, Troika had the pleasure of rehearsing and performing the national touring production of The Color Purple at Prince George's Community College in Largo, Maryland. After several weeks of building sets and costumes, as well as layering on all of the countless rehearsal hours, we had the success of our opening night shared with our community members and students in Largo. Post-pandemic, we were incentivized to go out of state due to theatrical tax credits offered in other states, as Ron had mentioned. This past fall, our company launched 5 different touring musicals. Each tour spent over 6 weeks rehearsing and performing in various cities across the country, bringing over 100 employees per production to that rehearsal city and spending between $2.5 and $4 million in those states. It is our hope as a Maryland-based company that we can continue to do this work here at home, supporting local businesses and encouraging the growth of new ones, hiring Maryland-based employees and directing state payroll taxes to Maryland. As you consider this bill, please consider not only the positive impact, but the importance of live theater in the community in both job creation and the role of bringing Maryland together after so much time apart. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I too want to thank you, Senator Gazzoni, for sponsoring this and for the opportunity for me to be here in support. My name's Ken Gentry. My company is Networks Presentations, and we're based in Columbia, Maryland. For the past 26 years, Networks has produced 8 to 12 Broadway tours per year. And as explained earlier, prior to the launch, we spend 4 to 6 weeks in rehearsal and technical fit-up to get the tours ready to be out on the road, spending between $2 and $4 million in a particular market. This money is spent on hotels, restaurants, and predominantly local labor through the stagecrafts of locally. We typically do this in Providence, Rhode Island, or one of the cities in New York State where tax credits are available to us. And over the years, since I've been doing this a really long time, we've seen such cities as Providence and Buffalo and Utica grow and flourish, not only with their attendance and the attention to the performing arts, but also the ancillary businesses in and around the theater. It has helped promote the growth of downtown and an awareness for the arts. Bringing the theater, being the theater that originates a Broadway tour will create national press and also enhances the local press and opportunities for community outreach. I fully support this bill because Maryland is our home state, and it would seem logical that we would do our work and spend millions of dollars here in Maryland rather than elsewhere. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions for the panel? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I have one, maybe one more. Is there Michael Mixter?
No, actually, his father went ill today, so he wasn't able to make it. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, the last one for me, this is, I don't know if it's so much fun, but it's certainly very important. It's really important, actually, and the focus is on things that I think you all know I care very deeply about. Senate Bill 598 creates the companion to a widely used program that already exists at the federal level called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. So basically, this credit is provided to employers who employ in one of 10 areas or 10 groups of individuals, including folks who are SNAP recipients, long-term unemployed, TANF enrollees, disabled veterans, reentering citizens, and all kinds of folks who need help reentering or entering the workforce. Of all the times right now when we're seeing wage inflation and yet still a lot of unemployment, folks that are in these 10 categories are ones that I believe we should be doing everything we possibly can to help employ and reemploy. And I'm hopeful that this tax credit will help do that. You will notice, if you paid attention to the House plan that they came out recently, this is the big component of that. There are some smaller components that I know we all have some bills on, like they have the diaper part and medical. Right. Yep. But this is sort of the big piece and the most pricey piece. But it's already functioning in our state in a significant way, and this will add to that ability by providing the Maryland side to the federal benefit. And Adam Kane, and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Kane on behalf of Allegis Redwood Maxim. We are a Maryland-based company in Hanover, Maryland that has many of Maryland's most iconic brands, including Trade Point Atlantic and Erickson Living, Aerotech, and many other companies. We have about 11,000 employees in Maryland and have companies across the country, but very proud to have our partnership with Maryland. Not as exciting as, growing grapes and theater and stuff, but hopefully, as the chairman said, very important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working on this issue. We did have this bill last year as well, although late, as we sort of thought through the issues with the pandemic and the economy and what would be important, and appreciate your continued support. As the chairman said, this bill is a very broad-based credit that targets hard-to-employ and folks that have had a hard time re-entering the workforce. And we think it's particularly important now for several reasons. The first being is we have significant populations of people who need extra support to be in the workforce. Second, the workforce participation rates are still below pre-pandemic levels, and we need the businesses and the economy needs more people in the workforce if they've chosen to stay out of the workforce. And third, as the chairman has indicated, we seeing lots of wage inflation, especially at the service levels, which is a great thing for our economy, but it's coming at a time where businesses were pretty beat up, and it's hard to sustain. So this would certainly help pay for some of that wage inflation in the short term and encourage people to continue to hire people even though wages are going up. It's sort of a neat program, as the chairman said. The state, it's sort of a state and federal partnership. It's a federal credit, but the state certifies the eligibility, so the state's already doing the work to certify that people are a member of one of the targeted groups and thus eligible for the credit. So it's a very efficient way to supercharge this credit because the businesses know how to use it as they're using it today from the federal perspective, and the state's already administering the program. If you notice in your package, it's also a credit given who it targets. It's one of the few credits really that has broad-based support from business, labor unions, and social justice groups because of the focus of the credit. Well, the outcomes, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But the outcomes basically we expect
Finish
to
your thoughts.
achieve would be to increase the workforce participation rate, get people off of the state programs, and thus help the economy grow and help businesses provide the extra support needed to target these populations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, you have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I frankly forget this bill from last year. I'm sure I voted for it. What is your company's role in this?
So we are we have a lot of employees in various different businesses. So like, for example, we own Erickson Living in your district with Riderwood Village, right?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of service employees and a lot of people who are entering the workforce in various different levels.
So you currently can qualify X number of your workers for the credit, the federal credit?
For the federal credit, yes.
How many do you have?
In Maryland, I think overall, we probably have, it varies depending on the economy, probably about 300-400 a year.
Okay. And what are the primary occupations?
Most of them are people, most of the credit ends up being people who are on the SNAP program. So they're in various different roles in sort of service jobs in dining and dining, healthcare, and sort of like housekeeping, security. That's kind of more of an entry-level job.
And these are basically wage subsidies, right?
Excuse me?
These are basically wage subsidies?
It's a small credit. The maximum credit is about $2,400, right? So yes, you had to pay the wages to get the credit. So
That's
yes.
what I meant.
Yeah.
So it's basically you're getting money back
Correct.
to share the cost of the wages.
Correct.
And the maximum is $2,400?
There's different levels for different categories, but most of it is a $2,400 level, which is the sort of
Gotcha.
SNAP,
Okay.
TANF.
I'll read the fiscal note and get up to speed on the mechanics, but it'd be great if you could provide us with just a chart that shows the question I'm asking, how many of your folks, what occupations?
Okay.
And also, the point you made about SNAP is most of the beneficiaries, so, but both by the individual situation and by the individual's job.
Right. Okay.
Super,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah Price and Henry Bogdan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Sarah Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in strong support of this legislation. There are a lot of small businesses operating in Maryland right now who are caught in a vicious cycle in which since the pandemic shutdowns, they have reopened at limited hours of operation due to a variety of factors, including labor issues and just low revenue numbers. A lot of businesses are reporting that they still have not yet returned to their pre-pandemic revenue numbers. And so now that they are operating at lower hours than previously, they are not generating enough revenue to be able to afford to bring in a full staff to open for additional hours. So this proposal is really a win-win situation for everyone involved. It will provide a wider variety of employment opportunities for individuals who are facing barriers, and it will help offset the costs of bringing on the additional staff as businesses return to their full range of hours of operation. It's an excellent common sense proposal. It will have a positive impact on Maryland's businesses and communities, not only right now, but also over the next several years as more of the baby boomer generation decides to retire, which will further impact the current labor situation. So with that, we would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bogdan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Henry Bogdan from Maryland Nonprofits. We're here to ask for an amendment to the bill, which we think is consistent with its approach. The bill's drawn to create a state credit for the situations where there is already a federal credit in place. As was already mentioned, there are 10 different categories of eligible hires under the federal act. However, the bill again is set up as a credit against income tax, which means that if you're a tax-exempt employer, you're not getting that incentive or assistance in beefing up workforce. However, nonprofits are only eligible for hiring in one of the 10 categories under the federal act, and that is the category for veterans. We are asking that at least if the bill is going to go forward, nonprofits who are eligible for a federal credit for those employees be given a way to make use of it in Maryland, and Maryland already has established a way to do that. Maryland has credits for hiring persons with disabilities. For a tax-exempt employer, you take that credit against your employee withholding account with the comptroller. The forms are already in place. There's a special form for nonprofits to claim that credit, both that credit and the commuting tax credit, which we submitted written testimony in support of a bill in here to expand it by Senator Kramer. Both of those can be utilized by nonprofits as a credit against the employer withholding account. All we're asking for with the amendment is that you allow nonprofit employers who are able to use the federal credit for hiring veterans to also get the benefit of that credit, the state incentive as a credit against their employer withholding account.
Very good. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on that bill, 598. And, sorry, Edward, you still want to do yours? You had all time to think about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill is Senate Bill 675 is the result of one of the results of the Western Maryland Economic Development Task Force, and it actually is second priority of the 5 or 6 bills we have in. And this deals with housing, particularly middle-income housing, which we don't have hardly any of in the 3 counties in Western Maryland. And if you talk to the businesses, and if you look at our geographical position in Maryland, if you look at the Hagerstown area, which is one of the growth areas in our neck of the woods, but even if you go a little south of there into Martinsburg area, West Virginia, where they just recently, a couple of years ago, built a huge Procter & Gamble facility, went there instead of Hagerstown. And Bedford County, just a little bit north of Cumberland, just announced the opening of a new plant that'll employ 500 people. And if you go west of Garrett County into the Morgantown, Clarksburg, Fairmont area in that I-79 corridor, that place is booming. So one of the things we're missing, or what we think we're missing in talking to businesses and the task force looking at it, is middle-income housing, because they're telling us there's no housing for people to come to work in the businesses we already have, or companies looking to expand that are there, or new ones. Where are they going to live? We don't have large corporations like those of you who live in the metropolitan area who can build a lot of housing. We just don't have the facilities to do that. And having said that, Senate Bill 675 creates a local property tax credit and a state income tax credit for newly constructed residential real property in Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington counties and the municipalities within. An eligible dwelling is newly constructed residential real property that has not been previously occupied since its construction for which the building permit for construction was issued after May 31st, 2022, and is occupied by the purchaser of the dwelling as the purchaser's principal residence. And the dwelling has to be equipped to be eligible with one of the following three things, or all of them, or any two of them, or whatever, is equipped with a sprinkler system installed in accordance with the law, an on-site sewage disposal system installed in accordance with the law, and fixed broadband internet access service connectivity. Housing, what we're classifying as middle income, the houses have to have a purchase price of at least $130,000, but not more than $250,000. And that is paid by an individual that intends to occupy the residence as the individual's principal residence. As I said, the bill creates a local property tax credit and state income tax credit for newly constructed residential properties in the 3 counties and/or municipalities in those counties, and they must grant by law a property tax credit of up to $10,000 against the property tax imposed on an eligible dwelling that is newly constructed, residential real property, for up to a period of 5 years. So if you get in this program and you did it today, you would be eligible for 5 years. After that, you don't get any more relief, so to speak. The state must reimburse the local governments for 50% of the property tax credit as provided in the state budget. A developer of residential real property may apply to the Department of Housing and Community Development for a state income tax credit of $7,500 if the developer constructs more than 10 middle income homes in one of the 3 counties or all of them together. If you look at the fiscal note, it's really very small, and we think it's something that really will benefit the 3 counties, at least to the point we hope to be able to try it, and we hope to be able to try it with the passing of this bill. And again, a minuscule fiscal note that might help us to move forward with economic development, providing people a nice place to live while they're in our part of the state working. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for support of the Senate Bill 675.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Senator Young?
Senator Edwards, Cumberland's less than half the population it used to be. Do you really want to build new houses there as opposed to redoing the ones that are sitting vacant?
We want to do both. Matter of fact, Cumberland used to be the 2nd largest city in the state at 50,000 people. Now they're down to 19,000.
Holy cow.
Which means there's...
A lot of it would be rehabbing some of these houses, but some of them are in such bad shape. Cumberland's asked for some legislation late, so bills are being drafted to put in to be able to tear down some of these and rebuild. And a rebuild would be eligible for something like this. But this just isn't for the city of Cumberland, it's for all 3 counties. And you get outside the city of Cumberland, there's a lot of space, places to build. And the Frostburg area is one of the faster growing areas of Allegheny County. And with Frostburg State University there, which we see as an economic engine, they do need this type of housing there.
And there aren't builders there building?
We don't have very many contractors who build houses for this purpose. No. We have some, but not very many. I mean, you can go out here and go up 97, hit 100, and you get over toward the chairman's area, and they've built, well, they're complexes, but big apartments or whatever. They probably built more in that one little section, and the 3 counties have built in 4 or 5 years or more. We're just trying to look for ways to stimulate something,
Well, I understand.
housing-wise.
I understand that, but I have a hard time understanding putting a press on to build new houses in 2 areas that are losing population.
Well, We don't want to lose population, so you got to try to do something to keep population there or get population there. And one of the ways you do that is to have middle-income housing. And again, if you go talk to the businesses in my part of the state, they would tell you that's a big issue.
Okay. That concludes the hearing on this bill, and thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's say, we got to shut down the computer, I know. So, yep. So, let's start voting at 10 after. Take 10.